Hola. I'm here today with 8 new books that I got from the library, picture books, and I'm going to review them in the order from my least favorite this week to my most favorite. Um, so let's get started. Okie dokie. My least favorite this week is called Caspian Finds a Friend by Jacqueline, I'm not sure how to pronounce her last name, Vasid? Vasid? Up to you to pronounce that the way you like. Illustrated by Mary Louise Brown. I'll start off with the artwork. The artwork is not unpleasant at all. It's not particularly fabulous to me either. I guess it's just a little bit, I don't know, neutral for me. And honestly, I know I said this is my least favorite, but it's kind of my biggest complaint about the book in general. And you know what? Honestly, maybe this is my fault. It might not be the book's fault. I found myself blanking out while reading this book, just like zoning out and not reading it and having to go back and like, wait, what did it say? I don't remember. Which I interpreted it as, because I read a bunch of books in the same like half hour as this book. This one was like towards the beginning of the books that I read even. And so there wasn't really like, I don't think I was in like a mood to zone out. This book just kind of like I zoned out during this book. So I attributed that to the book and not to myself. But maybe I'm wrong. It just kind of, I don't even remember what it's about. It's, I guess a boy writes a letter in a bottle, sends it out to sea, and maybe wants a friend or something, and then a polar bear comes and is his friend then. There's some like somewhat poetic text in here, I guess, watching, wondering, wishing, and slowly falls asleep, his dreams drifting on a gentle sea. Some kind of pretty writing, I guess. But man, this is just like nothing that grabbed me, no substance, and not a plot that felt like it had beats to it. Just kind of drifted, and I found myself feeling like I didn't actually read this book by the end. So that's why I disliked it. Alright, this one is called Fall in Line Holden, written and illustrated by Daniel W. Vandever. So the reason that this is not my bottom spot is because I respect a lot what this book's intent was. You can see in the back here. Fall in Line Holden was written with the intention of promoting creative thinking and originality, but also to begin conversations about a grim period in American history. Boarding school education has many connotations to different people, but to an entire generation of indigenous people, it was a militant term of conformity and an attack on language and culture. Boarding school education has had a profound impact on the loss of culture and identity in many indigenous communities. And it goes on. There's more detail here. I appreciate this. I think there needs to be more conversations about this, including outside of indigenous communities. And so I really appreciate that a book like this exists. However, that said, outside of that, I didn't particularly care for the book. The art is kind of confusing to me. It looks like it was made in Adobe Illustrator by somebody who maybe was more accustomed to drawing traditionally and wasn't like used to Adobe Illustrator. There's weird stuff like people's arms look like these weird little wisps. I'm not sure what that's supposed to be. Is it that the shadow of the arm? Is that supposed to be the whole arm? There's a lot of lines that don't make sense, and in general, the art style just feels kind of wonky to me. Wonky and plain and not particularly exciting to look at, which I think hurts the intent of the book somewhat. As for the writing, it's not terrible, but it is a rhyming book that I feel, while it does technically rhyme, I don't feel that it focused very well on keeping rhythm. So to me, that's very distracting when I'm reading a rhyme that doesn't fit into an actual rhythm, but simply has sentences, and then at the end of those sentences, the word rhymes with the sentence before it. That to me is a weak and distracting rhyme. More distracting than weak, I think, is the important thing, because it makes me think about the rhyme and try and think about how it would work rather than reading the actual book. I think you got to be careful with rhymes. The story itself is kind of just a demonstration of the concept of like conformity within these boarding schools. So it's just like saying the kids are marching. We march left and then right with no end in sight. We fall in line. We bypass the laughs of the custodial staff. We fall in line. It's a story about kids walking through a school in line because they have to be in line, and then the one kid who does not stay in line and is so every other rhyme is interrupted by the fall in line Holden, because Holden is distracted and not paying attention. So that story to me is just a little sparse. I feel like it's not like it doesn't start the conversation about these boarding schools, but it doesn't say much beyond, I guess, simply bringing up the subject. And I would have been personally interested in more actual speaking of experiences or things that happened, rather than just the kind of almost abstract concept of strict conformity versus the human spirit to not conform in this case. A little bit flimsy in my opinion, but I still appreciate its existence and want more books like it. So that's why it's not at the very bottom. I didn't zone out while reading it. Okay, this one's called The Cheer Up Bird by Edward van de Vendel. And Ingrid and Dieter Schubert must be... Who are they? Because it also says Lemniscate. Who... Is that the same as Lemniscates? Maybe it's not. I just kind of assumed it was, the illustrator that I've read a few books by before. I don't know who those credits go to, per se. Oh, Lemniscate is just the publisher. I don't know why it's under the title like that. That's interesting. And it's not related to Lemniscates. Ingrid and Dieter Schubert must be the illustrators. This book is doesn't have much going on with it. It's just kind of Australian. There is one page that I like, which I'll show you. And when I say it's just kind of Australian, God, that sounds like an insult. I didn't mean it that way. I just mean that there's not a lot going on in this book other than simply presenting, without much commentary, scenes of Australian animals. So its Australianness is kind of its only notable feature, is what I meant to say. So it's about a bird that flies over Australia and over all of these Australian animals who are having a bad day, and then they're not after the cheer up bird flies over them. And so it's just depictions of Australian animals in a cartoonish setting, not in any kind of realistic setting. I like this page just because it's the one moment where this kind of like interests me. At the beginning of the afternoon, she had to visit Kangaroo, who had been boss for such a long time that he became serious and gloomy. I almost wonder if that's some sort of reference to a cultural idea that I'm not familiar with, and in that sense, I found it intriguing and interesting. There's depictions of various Australian culture, these kangaroo holding didgeridoo, but the story doesn't really engage with that. That's mostly the pictures. The story is extremely stripped down. I think that the pictures are fun, even if I'm not a huge fan of the art style. But the story itself is just, these guys weren't having the greatest day. Then it came along Cheer Up Bird. The end of the story is that Cheer Up Bird gets exhausted by all of the cheering up that it does, and then it gets cheered up by its babies. So I feel like that's kind of that was the other only interesting part of the story, is like this idea of like, people who do a lot for other people getting exhausted by it, and then also this idea that like, a mother's faith in humanity being restored by her children. It's kind of cute. But the story, that's kind of a throwaway line at the end of the book, so the story doesn't really focus on that idea. So all in all, I didn't find much to be interested in this book. This one is called Little Red Reading Hood and the Misread Wolf by Troy Wilson, illustrated by Ilaria Campana. The illustrations are fine. It's not like the character designs aren't charming, but the style feels a bit rushed. It's got that kind of thing where it's like there's some like painterly textures, but they're very... there's like painterly textures here, you can see it here pretty well, but they don't feel like they're actual paint. They feel very much like they were just digital textures, sort of hurriedly put there to represent the idea that they're like, it almost feels like this is where the paint will go, placeholder art to me, and it has this all of the art feels very, outside of the character design itself, feels very rushed looking to me. You can see there's just these, I don't know, like the lines are sort of, they just feel rushed, and the textures feel rushed. There's not really any shading. It just kind of, not that there needs to be, but it just doesn't feel to me like there was very much, I don't know, it just feels rushed. The story itself is fine. I recently read another fairy tale retelling. This one's definitely better than that one. It kind of it builds upon the reader's understanding of the fairy tales, and plays off of them. So this wolf smells something in the girl's in Reading Hood's basket, and wants what's in there, and you just assume it's food because in the story she's bringing her grandmother food, but all it actually says is that she's bringing her grandmother a treat. I assumed it was food, and then it turns out in the end the wolf is like, I'm gonna get it, and grabs the basket and shakes the treat out, but the treat ends up being a book because the wolf likes the smell of new books. So that was kind of cute. Not too exciting or anything, but there was something there, I guess, as far as fairy tale retellings go. Personally, if I have a fairy tale retelling, the ones that I like are usually the ones that bring back the gruesomeness of the original tales, but in even more vicious detail. And that book didn't really do that, so kind of a mad book for me. This book is The Cat from Hunger Mountain by Ed Young. I think that this book has a really compelling, moral, like Aesop's Fable style moral in the end, which usually I'm not about those, but I liked this one. I don't know if the story was particularly strongly told, in my opinion. It seems a little bit bare bones. The art is pretty cool. There's a lot of interesting torn paper textures throughout, and I combined with paint, but mostly and actually some collage, maybe some photos. I think this cat's tail and paw might be photos of a cat's tail and paw cut out, but most of it is it's an interesting collage with, actually, you know what, never mind, it's all collage. It's not paint there. This is a collage with a photo of some sort of marble texture perhaps, or a oil like a oil color texture, I'm not sure. But yeah, interesting torn paper and collage, and look at this panda is made out of all these different shapes put together. So I like that. The story is about, some snobby elitist king cat character who wastes all his food and throws it out because he lives in the lap of luxury, but then when drought hits his land, he ends up running out of food and all of his workers leave, so he has to leave, and he ends up finding a priest that's or a monk or something that's handing out food for free, and he ends up needing to take advantage of that in order to stay alive, and then it turns out that the food that he's eating is the food that he threw away in the beginning of the story. It sort of relies on the premise that if you had cooked rice and were eating it and then threw half of it away, that rice would remain edible for a year afterwards, which not sure is accurate. So it's a little bit weird in that sense, but all in all, interesting story. Sort of just told without a huge amount of flavor, but if you like folktales, I think it's not terrible. But honestly, I like folktales a lot, and it didn't have the appeal that most folktales do to me. Man, I really need to cut my hair. Look at this dangle that doesn't fit into my hair tie. Okay, getting into the better books now. In fact, I think, these last three are the ones I really liked. It kind of jumps ahead to ones I really like. Showway by Jacqueline Woodson, illustrated by Hudson Talbot. Oh, Hudson Talbot. That's a very familiar name to me. Who is that? Let's see. Okay. Interesting die cut in the cover. This is the story of, a family, actually. I was going to say a girl, but it's not. It starts by saying when Suni's great-grandma was 7. And then you kind of think that maybe it's going to historically lead through the generations. Suni's great-grandmother, Suni's grandmother, then Suni's mother, then Suni. It does that. Then it continues past Suni, and the story ends with like Suni's great-grandchildren, which I thought was interesting and cool. Anyways, so it's the story of families, generation after generation's experience with American slavery. It does not shy away from depicting slavery with a very matter-of-fact tone. The story is pretty straightforwardly just describing little moments in the lives of, almost not even moments of the lives, but sort of just acknowledging the existence of each of these people and that they lived in slavery generation after generation, and then just kind of showing how that changes a bit as time goes on, including after emancipation. But it centers around the theme of these the showway. So the showway is this idea of the like quilts that are being sewn in such a way that they can act as maps to people seeking freedom. Which was actually a thing that, I assume is a historically accurate thing. I completely assume that. I actually learned about it from this book personally, so, that goes to show both my ignorance and the failings of the American education system, that I wasn't previously aware of this quite interesting detail about the story of American slavery. And so that's interesting, and it kind of goes. Each person kind of has their own relationship, sort of with the showway. Her grandmother makes them, then she makes them, and then the other girl makes them, and then eventually it becomes they aren't making them anymore, but they're holding them in their pockets, the pieces of the showway that were passed down. And it makes a note of saying that the showway is used to show people to freedom, be a map towards freedom for people, but that the people who are in this story, the people that this story are focused on, who are making the showways, are people who are making those maps for other people and actually aren't escaping slavery themselves, which I thought was interesting. There's honestly not too many, if I think about it, not too many books acknowledging slavery that are focusing on slavery that I've read that are not about escaping to freedom. Which is an interesting point. I kind of would be now interested in hearing more stories about people who specifically didn't escape to freedom, told for children. The best thing about this book, I would say, is the writing, because it has a very real feeling voice to it. Like, you can almost hear the voice of the person telling the story. It has a lot of really charming idiosyncrasies in the way it's told, phrases, grammar, but also just the rhythm to the writing. Here, I'll just read some. Years passed. Big Mama moved on to the next world, and Suni's great-grandma grew up, jumped broom with a young man named Ensler, had herself a baby girl and named that child Mathis May. Loved that baby up so, yes, she loved that baby up. And one day Mathis May would be Suni's grandma, but not for a long, long time yet. In the meantime, she learned to sew. Beautiful girl child learned to sew. It's just got some real voice and rhythm to it, and it made it very enjoyable to read, and that really helped bring even more life to this story that really deserved a lot of life and had a lot of personality already, due to the fact that, I believe, as they explain in the end pages, maybe they don't explain this, but I believe this is a true story about the author's actual family, which, of course, brings even more compellingness to the story. So, I recommend this one. I think it's moving and engaging and an important type of book to have in classrooms, honestly. Okay. The House of Lost and Found by Martin Widmark and Emilia, there's that name again, Jubak? I don't know how to pronounce Polish names. I'm so sorry. Anyways, you might recall, maybe, if you watch my videos a lot and have a really good memory, because my videos are long and include a lot of books, I actually reviewed another book by this pair before. I can't remember what it's called, but I'll put a picture of it up here. That one I did not review very favorably, but this one I loved. It's a story about an old guy whose like lives alone in the middle of nowhere, and all his kids and grandkids exist somewhere out there, but he doesn't seem to see them. And so he's all alone, and his wife has died. And the first half of the book is kind of focused on just him wandering through his house, and look at these dark colors, rain clouds, the rain falling, all these dead plants outside. It's really focusing on the gloom, and the little bits of brightness there in the first part of the story are, as the guy wanders through his house, he kind of remembers, but it comes in the form of like visions as far as the storytelling is concerned. Sees sort of visions of his memories of the people that have left his life. There's his wife with the poppy petals. Here they are in the meadow, and this is him as an old man, like watching himself as a young man in his memory, meeting his wife. He goes through the house and turns off all of his lights, and it's just very somber. The writing is really good. It's the writing had a very British tone to it, which I don't remember from the other one. So either I'm completely reading into things, or possibly part of the reason why I like this book better than the last one that I read by this pair is possibly because the translator is different. I'm not actually sure that these books are translated. Probably not, since it doesn't... Oh, no, yep, Polly Lawson. Man, I wish I could go back and see who translated the other one, because I bet they're a different translator, because this is not... this author is not writing in English. There's Swedish and a Polish illustrator. And this one's writing style just felt totally different tone, totally different wording, and totally different voice, a very British-sounding voice to me, that the other one didn't have. And that, I don't know, lent it a little bit of individuality, a little bit of charm, I felt. There's some crazy cool pictures in here. I actually like gasped a little bit when I came to this part where he goes downstairs and his house seems to be like underground, surrounded by a root system of some kind. Like, there's no explanation for this. Anyways, the story turns around when his neighbor comes by, and his neighbor's a small child who gives him a plant to take care of while the neighbor goes on vacation. And he doesn't really give the old man an option, and the old man is very bitter about it at first. And I like that detail. I like that it isn't just like an old man who's like thankful to have somebody acknowledge his existence. He's actually an old man who like is super bitter and is like curse this thing, and is like he's like actually kind of an unlikable person in some ways. He's like not he's an abrasive person. But then, of course, as you can probably predict, the caring for the plant does kind of bring him out of his shell. But the way that they did that is, although it's predictable, I didn't feel was cliche. It focuses mostly on him kind of... It doesn't like talk about how he feels. It talks about what he does. He just starts deciding as he starts caring for the plant that now he's going to clean. And it doesn't say because he felt better, because the plant made him feel better. So I liked that. It just kind of, you get the sense of what's going on, but it actually is giving you that sense through actions, actually moving the story forward and showing what the character's doing. His cat comes back, which is probably symbolic. He used to have a cat, but it left. So he cleans his house, and then there's just, again, these like shots that are like very much just, to me, depicting his emotions, not necessarily what's going on. And there's actually no text acknowledging this particular set of pages or what's going on here, but you understand sort of that maybe he's dreaming this, or maybe it represents his emotions. I don't know. But he's looking at the bud of the flower that actually hasn't come yet at this point in the story. It's going to happen in the next page. But he sort of anticipates it coming, and there it is. It's a poppy, just like in the field where he met his wife, and he sort of predicts maybe in his dream that that's what it's going to be, and it ends up being that's what it is. But man, I wish you could see this photo without this image without all the glare, because this drawing is actually really gorgeous. Gorgeous lighting, the cat hiding in the forest of poppy leaves here, and the giant poppy leaf, and it's very enigmatic to me, very dramatic, like what's going on, almost frightening. Yeah, so, and then it wraps up with a nice little happy ending. But yeah, I thought that was a great book. Okay, this book is called Umbrella by Taro Yashima. And this is a Caldecott honor book. I do seem to choose a lot of Caldecott honor books for my top spot. Anyways, okay, so there's two things that I especially like about this book. It's just a charming book overall. The story is really basic, but it's the kind of basic that's like... sort of, it's full of personality while being basic, because it kind of feels like it's one of those stories that's successfully communicates the ideas of it feels like it's told from the perspective of a child, and it does that really successfully, in my opinion, where a child kind of can see a worthwhile story to tell out of what is kind of simple and mundane, and that's what it kind of does. It tells a story that's sort of simple and mundane, but it sort of pulls you into the perspective that matters anyways, and that it's interesting anyways, and that it's worth telling anyways, through maybe little, I guess mostly just noticing of details that is highlighted throughout the writing. But the two things that I really like about this book are, one, the colors that are used in the art are just so gorgeous. It's all these pinks and blues and yellows, and I just feel like they really, I don't know, they pop out to me in an interesting way. They look really like graphically vibrant in spite of being like these pencil drawings with so many little lines and so many little details, which can sometimes lead to muddiness. Instead, it has this vibrant rainbow, almost shimmering quality to all of the pictures, which I think is so cool. There's something fizzy about it, The other thing that I like about this book is that, my understanding, this book was written by somebody whose original language is Japanese, and that was written in English without a translator, and it's written very well, but there are moments where it kind of comes across as like not being, the writing doesn't sound particularly native English. It sounds like English by an ESL speaker. Which gives it an enormous amount of personality and charm, in my opinion. It only about like 3 sentences in the whole book have that quality to it, but they really bring me down into a sense that this is a personal story, that it really happened, which I think maybe it did, and I think it might be a memory about somebody in this author's family, and that it's just brings a realism to it. It brings a sort of like you certainly don't get the sense that this has been scrubbed clean by editors or any kind of bureaucratic process. You get the sense that this is actually the story told by the author as the author tells it, which I think needs to be in more books. Honestly, I want to see more authors trained to be their own editors and being their own editors, so that so that the poetry and their voice come through unfiltered. I think is something that would be valuable to me personally. And this book has that to me. Just a few moments of idiosyncratic language that are really charming and inject a life and a personality and a voice into the story. And that's, I guess, kind of my theme for this week, and it's something that really matters to me. So, anyways, the story is about a young girl who is waiting through a drought for the rain, and then she goes out in the rain and enjoys the sound of the rain on her umbrella. And that's kind of it. But it's just so sweet and charming, and brings you into a childlike space in a way that's really enjoyable. And it's comforting. So, yeah, I recommend that. All right, well, that's all the books that I have. So I'm going to see you next week. And thanks for watching. Bye.